Still the king of college football. That's left up to debate. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, talking up the tide here for the next hour with Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. We also have Brent Beard on the line from College Sports Today, and you can catch him on First Coast News, and we hope Brent will clear up his audio issues and can join us very, very soon. We, of course, invite you to take part in the live chat. Leave your comments and questions specifically on Alabama football, but regardless of who you root for, you know what the deal is here. When we've got a live stream, you are welcome to talk college football in the live chat, but we are strictly talking Tide with our guests. Steve, how you doing tonight?
Man, doing well, Mark. Can't complain. What about yourself?
I am doing just fine. And looking forward to this hour. So this is something that we do each and every week with Ohio State, Florida State, and Miami is an exclusive live stream for those three teams. But we are looking to expand. Tonight we've got Miami coming up at 7 o'clock Eastern time, and we've got the Florida Gators at 8 o'clock Eastern time. We've also dedicated a full live stream to Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, UCF, USC, and others. So now let's talk Alabama football. 11-2 this past season, number 8 in the country. How is the fan base taking that, Stephen? It's like the apocalypse.
Well, on one end, Mark, it's the apocalypse. On the other end, people sort of understand what happened. Injuries did happen. You did not have a Dylan Moses on defense. You did not have a Joshua McMillan. 3 games into the season, you lose on a Brian Ray, and then down throughout the stretch, you lose a DJ Dale. Now, still not in particular making an excuse, but when you don't have leadership on your defense, that does play a role, and especially not having that leadership where you're bringing a guy and 36-year-old Pete Golding it's his first time calling a defense or putting together or scheming a defense in a major Power 5 program. And when you come in with the glass half empty, not having your best guys, that is a problem. Now, he did do the best he could do, in which Alabama still finished in the top 20 in both scoring defense and total defense. But yes, when you're not in the top 5 and when you are not number 1, for the people that make Alabama football profitable, that being the Crimson Tide fan base, when you're not at number 1, that's a problem for a lot of people.
It is a problem. They're a bit spoiled down there, so number 8 in the country doesn't necessarily cut it. But for one season, a down season in which they lost arguably the best quarterback in the country, I think it's certainly understandable to just break down those 2 losses. LSU, I think, showed us to be the best team in the country. They beat Alabama by 5. That is the most competitive game that LSU, forget the score against Auburn that required a 10-point lead, a late touchdown, an onside kick, that situation, that in addition to Auburn, that Alabama presented the best game for LSU. And then in addition to that, the only reason they lost to Auburn was they clanked a field goal in the final couple minutes from 30 yards, and they also had 2 pick sixes from their backup quarterback in Mac Jones. So Alabama football is just fine.
Alabama football is just fine. And just going back to what you mentioned about LSU, that was a matchup where give Joe Burrow a ton of credit. He and Joe Brady really worked some magic there inside Bryant-Denny Stadium, but also give Tua Tagovailoa a ton of credit playing on a seriously sprained ankle. I don't believe he should have been out there from the get-go, but knowing the warrior that Tua is, he wants to play for his teammates. He wants to play for his brothers. And despite the pain he was in, could barely walk, we're talking about a young man that still threw for 418 yards and 4 touchdowns and made it a heavyweight prize fight, if you will, in the second half against LSU. In terms of Auburn, Mac Jones, a very valiant effort. Yes, he had the 2 pick sixes, but bounced back with 4 touchdowns. So I think the fan base very excited for this upcoming spring game, this upcoming A-Day game, but just spring practice in general to see, what will the 2020 version of Alabama football look like.
Talking Tide, we got Stephen M. Smith on the line from touchdownalabama.com. Please join him and the rest of the staff there covering Alabama sports on a daily basis. We hope to make contact with Brent Beard. You see his shining face there in the middle. You can catch Brent on College Sports Today and First Coast News, and he's joined us on a number of occasions to talk SEC football. All right, Stephen, before we get to personnel for 2020, the recent commits and National Signing Day, and also the schedule, wanted to look at these recent hires with Charlie Strong and Steve Sarkisian. This has been the most star-studded coaching staff in college football over the past decade under Nick Saban. Future head coaches, recent head coaches litter this staff on a consistent basis. But again, Steve Sarkisian back with Alabama as a coordinator, and Charlie Strong, we know that things haven't necessarily worked out for him at the head coaching level, but as a defensive strategist and coordinator, he is one of the very best.
He is, and starting this off with Sarkisian, throughout the week, his name was sort of rising for that vacancy at Colorado, and he was interested in the job, applied to be interviewed, but on today, it was reported by ESPN's Chris Lowe that not only has Sark turned down the job, but he is expected to get a pay raise from the University of Alabama in somewhere in the vicinity of $3 million. So he's going to be up to now making $3 million, becoming one of the more highest paid assistants in college football. And this is huge for Nick Saban because for the last few years or so, the conversation had become, is Nick Saban too demanding to work with? Is he too tough? Is he too strenuous on these coaches? What is causing these coaches to not want to commit and continue to be with Alabama and Nick Saban? What is going on with this coaching turnover? So getting the Steve Sarkisian to commit for going into his second year, a big deal because it starts to show the continuity of maybe Alabama can keep coaches, maybe Nick Saban can keep guys around the program. So that was big, and on top of that, it's a big sign for the Alabama quarterback room, just letting them know that Sarkisian is not leaving it sort of high and dry, especially after you bring in a 5-star quarterback from modern day high school in Bryce Young. And a young man that Sark has known since he was in the 8th grade, got him in here as a hot shot 5-star quarterback. So keeping Sark around, a big deal. When you look at Charlie Strong, even from an analyst perspective, being behind the scenes, he's going to really help this Crimson Tide defense, especially at that inside linebacker position, getting Dylan Moses playing well, Joshua McMillan, Christian Harris, Shane Lee, Alakaho, and the bulk of others that are at that position, and even guys in the secondary after the likes of Patrick Surtain II. So even with Strong not being a coordinator, him behind the scenes, kind of being that executive producer behind the scenes as an analyst is still, a big deal.
We're going to welcome in Brent Beard from First Coast News and also College Sports Today. We hope the audio is working. Go, Brent.
Well, I hope it is too.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely, we can hear you. So
wonderful.
Both you and Stephen to look at the screenshot if you can see it right now and slightly adjust your cameras so we can see your bright shining faces squared up as best as possible. Brent, we appreciate you working out and
absolutely
the technical issues and staying with us here. It's always a great pleasure to have you on, sir. I respect this guy and the work that he does. Again, College Sports Today and First Coast News. Brent, we're, of course, talking college football with Alabama front and center. We lean on you for your overall SEC perspective. Do you think that this program's dropped off at all, or do you see it as the same program you looked at 2 and 3 and 4 years ago?
Well, I had the opportunity to cover the LSU game and was also at the Citrus Bowl. So I think the main problem last year was the defense, as Stephen talked about. And by the way, Stephen, I know we have met before at SEC Media Days and some different functions. like that with football. So appreciate your work and what you do. Mark is certainly a legend that we see on Twitter and so forth every day. But guys, I frankly don't think they're that far away at all. I mean, to me, and from what I saw, particularly in the LSU game, if they were either A, were able to make a stop, or B, were able to get the onside kick, I think they may have had a real shot at being able to win that game. And also in the Auburn game, if they make one more stop, they may have done that. I mean, guys, you think about this. If they had beaten Auburn, it would have been a beauty contest as far as the college football playoff was concerned about who was going, either Oklahoma or Alabama. So that would have been an interesting overnight and Sunday morning debate, would it not, Stephen, to have been able to see how that one would have come out. But I think this mainly it's mainly on defense. They weren't able to get a pass rush. I think with some of the guys, particularly they're bringing in, even some of these freshmen can help. I think the linebackers will be improved. I know they've got to rebuild that secondary to a degree. So, Mark, to your question, no, I don't think this team's missed much of a beat. And even though they lost 2 games last year, that they really, and not taking away anything from Auburn and LSU, they were certainly not that far away from being where they wanted to be.
I was asked every 5 minutes down the stretch who should be in the college football playoff. And once Oklahoma won the Big 12 championship and Oregon, of course, lost that second game, my answer was very clear. The team that's earned it based on the criteria that I think's valuable and should be considered is that Oklahoma's earned it because they are the Big 12 champions with only 1 loss, and they're the only team aside from the 3 undefeateds that can say that. But if you're asking me to select the 4 best teams in the country to go play, I'm still grabbing that Alabama team that lost 2 games this year, and I'm going to put them in the playoff, maybe even with a backup quarterback. Certainly with Tua, they're one of the top 4 teams in the country. But and so it's a difficult equation to master, looking at who's earned it versus who do we believe to be the 4 best. So, Stephen, I'm going to offer you up the same question in regards to where you think this program stands today versus do you think that there's been any measurable fall off? Forget the 11-2. Of course, every team's going to lose games and not go to a championship round every year. That's an unreasonable, ridiculous standard that's been set. But if you think it's just basically the same program that it was in 2015 and 16.
I don't think there's a huge drop-off, Mark. I think the one thing, it just goes back to the coaching continuity and just getting the coaches to Alabama that want to be there and that want to consistently be there. That's been kind of the bugaboo for Alabama as of late. You look at programs like Clemson, Dabo Swinney, just the ability to keep his staff together, and the main go-getters of his staff, the likes of Todd Bates, the likes of also Brent Venables, continuing to remain at Clemson. You have other programs that just find a way to keep the top tier, the primary assistants together on that staff. And for a lot of these young athletes, these young recruits, they love continuity, especially those that come from a place of structure, a family of structure, and even from those that may come from a family that, lacks that structure. They long to have that structure. And for a lot of these guys, they feel like if Coach X was the coach that went all out to recruit me, to get me to sign my letter of intent on the dotted line, then I expect for Coach X to be with me throughout the remainder of my time in college. Now, I understand things come up. You get a bigger job, you get a better situation, but that's what a lot of these people have grown to respect or to expect nowadays. So I'm not saying that there's a huge drop-off. What I am saying is one of the things that Nick Saban has got to get back to is having that continuity within his staff so that you continue to get the best recruits, you can continue to get the best coaching, but most importantly, you continue to sell that, the family here at Alabama can keep some prominent coaches around.
We're taking your comments and questions here in the live chat concerning Alabama football. And of course, we invite fan bases from all over the country, and they join each and every live stream, regardless of who we're talking about. But we're strictly talking Bama on the live stream here. I'm going to pass this question on first to Stephen. And if Brent, we know that you're all over the place in regards to trying to cover the entirety of the SEC plus Florida State, plus some of the other schools there in Florida. So Steve grinds it down when it comes to Alabama. So I'm going to offer some of these questions to him, but certainly if you've got any thoughts, jump right in. Josh Bosch is asking, do you think a defensive tackle Ishmael Sopsher will play and be part of the defensive line rotation?
It's crazy, Mark. I was just thinking about Ish last night. I was just thinking
we
about
can call him Ish. Okay.
I was just thinking about Ish last night. Ishmael Sopsher is a playmaker. I mean, this guy out of Louisiana, strong core, violent hands, good feet. Freddie Roach is licking his chops right now because here's a guy that really, Ishmael Sopsher looks up to Freddie Roach, respects Freddie Roach, and this is somebody that is going to be in the rotation. Now, can he crack probably that second line of that rotation will be the question for Sopsher, because you got DJ Dale, who's a great defensive tackle. You got Fidarian Mathis, who can play defensive tackle or defensive end. You bring in guys like Timothy Smith in this recruiting class, Jamil Burrows, Jamarian Latham. So there's a lot of guys that came in this 2020 class on top of the guys that came in 2019, including Ishmael Sopsher. So when I look at Ish is going to get quite the amount of playing time, but can he break into that second tier, first off the bench, that second tier of the rotation? That's what I look forward to seeing from him coming up in spring ball.
I think also to dovetail with that was Sopsher, I think, also had to get in better shape. I think he had to drop a little bit of weight. And at that point, he got past a little bit. But I'm with Stephen. I think this is going to be an important year for him to be able to show what he can be able to do. Listen, the kid Tim Smith, who is from the state of Florida, where we are, you've got a situation, guys, to where this guy may be, along with the DJ Dale, who unfortunately was hurt, I think he would have made a difference for Alabama if he could have played along the line at the end of the season. But I think Smith is just a guy who maybe at some point can't be blocked. He is that kind of a wrecking ball in a lot of ways. So I think Bama fans are going to enjoy to be able to see him play. And if I may, guys, another thing that came out of today, Butch Jones is going to have a new title. Stephen, help me on this. You may have heard more on this, but and give Jones a lot of credit. He is stuck with Saban, and I think he's being rewarded for this right now. I think it's kind of an assistant head coach type thing, but I'm with Stephen too. It was very important that Sark stayed. They didn't want to go out and get another offensive coordinator, and I think what Saban has done, to dovetail again with what Stephen's saying, Mark, is I think he has gotten a commitment out of these assistants of, I don't know, maybe 3 years, but I think at least 2 years. And that's going to be important as far as giving them the unity on that staff that they're going to have.
Going back to what you mentioned there, Brent, on Butch Jones, he will serve as the special assistant to head coach Nick Saban, special assistant to Coach Saban. And basically what that entails, he would do what Bobby Williams did. When Bobby Williams was here, he kind of served in that same role, which is being around Nick Saban, kind of being the guy as Saban's right-hand man, so to speak, to a degree. And Butch Jones has deserved that. He has earned that. You know, this is somebody. He really has. This is somebody that, despite the fact that people like to look at him as the butt of jokes at times, but Butch Jones has actually instituted the continuity in terms of Alabama football. He's been around. He's been in the meeting rooms. He's been cutting up the game film in terms of offense. He's been a major part of helping this offense be prolific from off the field, off the scene, kind of engineering that sort of thing. So very proud of what Coach Jones has done. The players really seem to like him. They really seem to enjoy him. Every time he gets that cigar after beating Tennessee, he's extra happy. So the people in Tuscaloosa have really gotten to kind of enjoy what Coach Jones is bringing.
Well, and I think the thing that he does so well, guys, is he evaluates talent on another level. Frankly, now the problem is when you give him a when he gets in trouble is brick by brick and all the slogans and things of that nature. He doesn't need to do that, and that's one of the reasons I think he's excelled at Alabama. And Mark and Stephen, if I may, let me go back for a minute with Charlie Strong. Strong obviously was on the Florida staff, which is about an hour away from where we live here in near Jacksonville. The thing that Strong really does for Alabama, among other things, besides his defensive prowess, it's just really the fact of he is a father figure to players. They really look up to him. And frankly, he can probably bench press more, and some of them can too. But at the same time, Strong is tremendous as far as player relationships. And I think what he brings to the staff, and look, guys, let's also be honest. Saban is at a point of his career that one of the reasons that he's at Alabama is to get Saban's blessings on continuing his career in the next probably a year or two, as far as maybe going to another school. And that's something Saban's been able to do. I don't know if he gets enough credit for how he has kind of kick-started some guys' careers. And we talked about Butch Jones a few minutes ago. Stephen's right. It may not be right now, but I can see in 2 or 3 years where Butch Jones actually becomes a guy that people really want again.
And just going back to your thought there, Brent, on Charlie Strong, one of the things I kind of look at is, even from an analyst perspective, what Charlie Strong is going to do for these inside linebackers, and not necessarily the Dylan Moses or Joshua McMillans, but the Christian Harrises and Shane Lees. Take those two young players under his wing, and first and foremost for Christian Harris, showing him not to be overly reliant on his athleticism. He's an athletic guy, but trusting his eyes, his instincts, and making the plays. But on top of that, for Shane Lee, not thinking so much. There were times where Shane Lee was a little bit too conscious. He thought, do I really hit this gap? Do I really attack this play? Is this guy going to spin off me and go to the next level of the defense? But just being able to see the play, young man, react, hit the gap. You know what you're supposed to do. Just go out there and do it. So the main thing with Christian Harris and Shane Lee, taking those two young men that got experience last year, probably pushed more so out there before they were ready to, but taking those two young men that got experience and making them even better.
Well, and see, that's why it's so important to have Moses back, because Moses, frankly, is going to be the leader of that defense. But you know what? Josh McMillan, to me, is very important. Josh McMillan with a mechanical engineer's degree, really smart guy. And I'm not saying he'll be starting, but it's going to be invaluable having him there.
We will get to as many comments and questions as we possibly can, so hang in there. Dale Sherman, Ballard Sports Media as well. We appreciate many of you, including Jay Jobs, encouraging everyone to like the video. So if you know anything about Google and YouTube, you know that it's critical that if you enjoy the videos, if you enjoy the live streams and what we do here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, that you at least just make that one click and like the video. Go out there and share it on social media as well. We got Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.com. Please join him for the best in Alabama football and sports coverage across the board. And Mr. Brent Beard from College Sports Today and First Coast News, who does an outstanding job. We've had him on a number of times to talk college football, and he is a wealth of historical and current knowledge on the SEC in particular. John Bosch is asking, do you think safety Daniel Wright will start at safety?
I think he will. I think Daniel Wright will actually take over at that strong safety spot for the departed Jared Maiden. Daniel Wright at 6'1", 190 pounds is the younger brother. Well, Daniel Wright at 190 pounds is the younger brother of Major Wright, of who played for Florida and spent some time in the National Football League. Daniel Wright finally has seemed to put things together. For the longest of time, Daniel had some issues, off-field stuff, and on top of that, had a shoulder problem in the 2018 season, which cut his season short to about just 4 games. So finally healthy. He is working out with the team. Coach Scott Cochran actually posted a video on Twitter of Daniel Wright getting his workout in the gym, and this is a guy that has tremendous potential. He's played in 31 career games, and for a secondary that has a lot of youth, Daniel Wright, along with Patrick Surtain II, have the most experience. So I'm looking at Wright to be a guy to be a leadership player, a guy to be a somebody that can guide some of these younger guys. And I think Daniel Wright starts at strong safety. Really like what he brings as a hard hitter, but somebody that can cover as well.
I think John here, I was just going to say real quick, Brent, and then you can jump in with your analysis. Our guy, John Bosch, I think he's determined to go through the entire 2 deep depth chart and ask us.
I mean, he looks like he wants to know.
There's more coming. There's more coming.
That's
okay,
right. Brent. Well, the thing I was going to say to dovetail what Stephen's saying, Stephen, I wonder where Jordan Battle is going to be in this safety situation too. I think that's going to be interesting to see as he continues to grow and continue to make some plays. That's going to be pretty fascinating in order to see that too. We'll get on the quarterback thing in a minute, but again, that's going to be the big rebuild to me on this defense. It's going to be that secondary, where that secondary goes.
Absolutely. I look at Jordan Battle. I think he starts at free safety, taking over for Xavier McKinney. Yeah. He kind of reminds me a bit of McKinney, but also a mixture of Deontay Thompson when you talk the range of Jordan Battle playing from hash mark to hash mark. I just go back to the first game of the season last year against Duke. I was on the field when Jordan Battle got the interception. He came from the opposite end of the camera. Yeah. I don't know where he came from. He is flying from the opposite end of the camera to pick off the pass. So the guy is rangy. The guy is insanely athletic. Crazy thing is he and Eddie Jackson hail from the same hometown. So really like what Jordan Battle brings coming from St. Thomas Aquinas. The guy's an athlete.
He really is. And also, Stephen, a guy that I think is interesting that's coming in is Christian Story, who is that's been talked about as maybe being a very rare two-way player in Nick Saban's system. I think I'd have to see that to believe it, to be honest with you. But at the same time, Story, the Alabama Gatorade Player of the Year, it can really do almost anything on the field. I'm hearing a little bit about him playing at safety, Stephen, and also it will be fascinating where they may line him up on the offensive side of the ball, possibly.
He's 6'1", 213, Brent. I mean, the guy played quarterback in high school, running back in high school, defensive back in high school. He did everything but sell hot dogs. He did everything in high school but sell hot dogs. So Christian Story is an amazing athlete. He's an intriguing individual because he can play quarterback, he can play running back, but I feel like his body structure, Nick Saban would want him as a defensive back, but at the same time, if somebody was to get hurt offensively, nothing like plugging a Christian Story on the offensive side too.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's almost as versatile as Mark Rogers is. So
I still give Mark Rogers the check on that part, though.
I got a lean there, a bit of a lean, a bit of an edge, possibly. Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch my back, and I'm going to have to not let up.
And I think, I think Mark's going to have to work on that 40 time, maybe a little bit too, and possibly that vertical leap. But
I think those are all headed the other direction, Brent.
You can tell he's in shape. Guys, let me share something with you that we did this week and dovetail into this what we're doing here. We are at First Coast News. We're doing a special on the combine that's coming up. One of the things I was directed to do was to talk about some of the upcoming players that might be a possibility for the combine next year. And talking, and one of the guys from our area obviously is Mac Jones from the Bowl School in Jacksonville. So I talked to an NFL writer that I have a lot of respect for, and I said, is it possible, if he wants to do this, that Mac would be an NFL prospect? And the answer I got was, he said, it's funny. He may not end up being the starting quarterback in Alabama with the young guys who are coming in, but he said, I'm very impressed with Mac because of his leadership, his intelligence. He's got a strong arm. He is accurate. He can put his head down and gain short yards if he needs to. And this guy told me, he said, people are going to be surprised to hear this, but said that if he wanted to come out, that Mac is good enough to where he could make a real impression in the combine. So, Stephen, I don't know how much of that you thought about. And again, I think Mac's kind of a glue guy. And I think he probably, particularly if he's the starting quarterback, may even be there another couple of years. But I thought both of you guys might be a little bit of surprise about what some NFL guys actually think about Mac Jones.
I'm not surprised by it at all, Brent. I mean, I see this young man every day. And I go back to Mac's freshman year. This was 2017. Mm-hmm. I'm out there at practice, and he's throwing the ball to Terrell Shavers on scout team. Not too many people go toe for toe with Nick Saban.
Yeah,
I have seen 300-pound men cry at the feet of Nick Saban. I've seen this happen. So here comes, Nick Saban goes right in the face of Mac Jones and says, Mac, stop throwing deep balls to Tyrell Shavers. I'm sick of that. Stop throwing deep balls. Mac Jones gets up, stares his head coach flat in the face and says, Nick, if you want me to stop, tell your defense to check me. Tell them to come at me. And the whole practice stops. Everybody goes, whoa, who in the world was that? And they find out it was Mac Jones. Everybody quickly said, okay, that's the quarterback right there. Mm-hmm. Even Nick Saban was impressed and had to take a step back. When you got the nerve to go toe-to-toe with Nick Saban loves that competitive fire. From that moment, I knew Mac Jones is nothing to be messed with. This guy can play.
Well, and Mark, we had a question a few minutes ago. Would Mac Jones be the starting quarterback? Look, to me, I think he will. And just what he's proven. I mean, as Stephen said, he knows the system. And one of the things that coaches really like or guys they can trust. And that is a big factor as far as who Nick Saban puts on the field. If he can trust the guy, and he knows that. And I know about the pick sixes in the Auburn game. We get that. And I think there were some extenuating circumstances there. But the reality is, I think he does. Now, obviously, with Bryce Young coming in, that's a great possibility. They put more weight on him. They're able to play him. And again, we're not overlooking to his brother either in this point. But I tell you one thing, this Alabama quarterback room coming up, Stephen, there are a lot of schools going to be envious of that Bama quarterback room coming up this year.
Not just the quarterback room, Brent, the running back room, the receiver room, the offensive line room, all of it.
I agree.
All of it.
Yeah, well, and as one of our viewers said, they're getting back to the Bama factor. And guys, I think we're going to see more of this with Alabama. They're not going to abandon the offense with Steve Sarkisian there, but I do think, if we want to call it the Bama factor, I do think they get back to that because Stephen, had that been a real issue for Bama on third and short, they have not been able to get the ball where they want to be able to do that. So I think with an improved offensive line, with Najee coming back, and listen, and Mark and Stephen can talk about the Sanders kid that missed the entire season with the injury. I hear he is going to be unbelievable coming up. So there's no question about that this Bama offense that this year is going to be somewhere near where it was last year.
I got one thing to say on that, Brent, and that is Nick Saban the last 2 years has gotten back to doing the most important thing, and that is recruiting the in-state talent.
Yeah,
I understand you want to get the guys from New York, from California, from Texas, have that national appeal, that national presence, but when an in-state guy gets an offer, it hits different. It's like you just won the Mondo Powerball lottery. And when that in-state kid gets an offer, it just means so much to them because they grew up on Bama. They've been raised in the tradition. They've been brought up in it. So to get back to recruiting the in-state talents and, like you mentioned, getting off the field on third down defensively, running the football well offensively, having that balance. This 2020 season, I mean, I can't tell you, people are waiting to just tear down Bryant-Denny Stadium, just bust in there for the A-Day game. They're ready to bust the door in.
Well, the problem with all the construction going on right now,
I hope nobody don't get hurt, man, trying to do that.
I know. Yeah, well, and they're actually only about 30,000 are going to be able to go to the game. Mark and Stephen, I thought, well, take the theme to Legion Field from one last time, and we would have a little more capacity for that. But obviously, the stadium will be very impressive when it's done.
So we talk Alabama football tonight for a full hour with Brent Beard from First Coast News. You can also catch him on his show, College Sports Today. Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.com, covering the Tide on all fronts each and every day. This is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. You would do well in following each one of these gentlemen on Twitter to be able to track their exploits and their platforms, and also follow me on Twitter as well. And there's a very good reason. For those of you who watch me on a regular basis, know that I never mention my Twitter account, but I have for the past week. We're running a little test here with some marketing people involved. So please just follow me on Twitter. Just do it. Just follow me on Twitter. If you have no interest in Twitter, don't want to hear what I have to say, and to tell you the truth, I rarely have anything to say on Twitter. Just follow me on Twitter. Just support the channel. Just follow me on Twitter. Just trust me on this one. All right, guys, let's see. We've got the incoming class that we've talked to Stephen about. So we'll serve this up to you first and foremost, Brent, in regards to the guys that get you excited about Alabama football in 2020 in regards to the early enrollees in this incoming class.
Well, we mentioned the Smith kid a few minutes ago from the state of Florida. I mean, again, if folks are just tuning in, Florida wanted him very badly. Stephen knows, and Alabama being able to secure him, he is a difference maker. I mean, he is a Quinnen Williams type, and I know the body type may be a little bit different, but that's one thing they need is someone who can wreak havoc to be able to come in like that. I think that's one of the guys who is going to be very, very impressive along that line. Now. Listen, these linebackers that Bama's brought in, particularly Will Anderson, and I'm not joking about this, and Stephen lives in the state, so he hears him even more than I do right now. I don't go a day or two that I don't hear something more about Will Anderson. Stephen, can you talk about him a little bit and the excitement? Is the excitement up there for this kid and for these linebackers coming in? It's almost nonstop from what I gather in talking with some different media.
It's real, Brent. It's very real, especially for Will Anderson. I mean, they're excited about Chris Braswell. They're excited about Darius Robinson, Demoy Kennedy, and Jackson Bratton. But when you mention the name Will Anderson, it's like an apocalyptic joy. For real, because this young man's body type at 6'4", 230 pounds is already Tim Williams. Tim Williams and a little bit of Christian Miller in there as well. But when you watch his first step on tape, people get flashes of, dare I say it, Derek Thomas. People get flashes of that man right there. And I, for one, am one to say, let's not put too much pressure on these young men. Let's not write a check that they can't cash. But at the same time, you just can't help when you watch his first step, you think, dear God, is it true? Is this real? Am I watching this? Can this happen? So the excitement that you're hearing about Will Anderson, it is legit. People are getting excited by the day, but the entire inside and outside linebacker class Alabama has brought in, the likes of Pete Golding and Sal Sunseri are both really licking their chops right now, because you got depth with both groups, you got talent with both groups, you got a lot of potential at both inside and outside linebacker with this class in here.
Well, I agree. And then, guys, another thing we've got to say this before we sign off here is, can Alabama kick a field goal this year?
Oh, Brent. You know what? Brent, Mark, I've been trying to pitch this to Nick Saban. I've been trying to make this pitch.
Yeah.
And the pitch is, take Ty Perine, the punter, have him kick,
absolutely,
and have Will Riker, the kicker, punt. I mean, flip those two.
Now, in all seriousness, I understand Riker, if he ever gets healthy, that they think that they could depend on him for 2 or 3 years, that he would be the guy, because he's got.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah,
Riker pulled something in his right hip against Southern Miss, and he was not right since that game. So he's healthier now. I think one of the things that Scott Cochran needs to implement is more of those lower body exercises to prevent those injuries. But I agree with you. He came out of high school in Hoover, very accurate, very dependable leg, just needs to get healthy and just needs to stay healthy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think we really haven't said much about it, guys, but the schedule's beefed up this year. Obviously, starting with Southern Cal. And look, I know the situation with Clay Helton, because Mark's talked about it on here with some of his Pac-12 guys. But look, that's a pretty good football team. And I know they ended up about 65th in recruiting, which is very un-Southern Cal-like. And they may make a change at the end of the year. 65th. That's where they ended up in the recruiting rankings, which is unbelievable, frankly, for Southern Cal. But look, there's still some real talent, particularly at quarterback with that group. And then on September 19th, I may be off for a day or two, Georgia comes into Tuscaloosa, and what's going to be very exciting. And look, and people may have forgotten this, but this is going to be incredible. But in November, there are no cupcakes before Auburn. Alabama plays A&M, and then they play Auburn. And then the thing that a lot of Alabama fans will get a chuckle with on here is, obviously, Auburn wanted to move that Georgia game to the middle of the year, and they did, and get it off the Alabama in Georgia. And they never played them back-to-back. I mean, they had a week in between. But what happens now for the SEC is done is, before Auburn plays Alabama now, Auburn plays LSU. So so there won't be any cupcake now before Alabama, that's for sure. So the Alabama schedule this year, I think, going to be a little more attractive for Bama fans than it was last year.
Yes, no frosting there in the November schedule for any of those clubs. Man, brutal when it comes to looking at Auburn and South Carolina's schedules in particular this past season. Of course, I always like when people comment in the live chat about things I apparently said, which what is being stated right now is that I said, and this happens with all of us, I know, that I stated that Ohio State and Clemson was the de facto national championship game. You cannot find that anywhere. It was never stated. I never made that claim, but people are having some fun with me. But they are loyal viewers, so we can let them have some fun and be a little delusional about what I stated and what I didn't. That's fine.
Hey, Mark, at least they're listening. That's my attitude about that, is the fact of, look, as many numbers and names as we deal with on a daily basis, we're just going to miss something every now and then. But my opinion of that is, they catch us with something, you know what, they're at least listening or reading. So I think that's probably pretty good.
Well, you know what happens there is I got to catch him with a thumbnail, and the thumbnail, I believe, stated Clemson, Ohio State, de facto national championship, ?
Yeah.
And then I get ridden to town over that.
I just gotta say this, Brent. The game for Alabama next season that I am somewhat nervous about because I gotta make this trip again is going to Oxford, Mississippi, the Grove, and facing Lane Kiffin, facing Lane Kiffin, John Rice Plumlee, and Ole Miss, and that matchup right there is the one matchup where I'm just praying, Lord, just get me home alive.
Yeah,
get me home
yeah,
alive.
oh yeah. How wild is that Grove going to be in the anticipation for that?
It is going to be a madhouse.
It really is.
There was one year where I almost lost my car. That's how crazy it is.
Well, I tell you what, though, I think, look, that's going to be exciting to have Kiffin there, and also Mike Leach at Mississippi State. And by the way,
no doubt.
If folks haven't seen this, the lineup came out a few hours ago for the SEC Media Days in Atlanta. So it's going to be fun to have those guys there. But I will say this, Stephen, I don't think Ole Miss has the line of scrimmage that they need yet. I think it's going to take probably 2 or 3 years for that to happen. But Lane Kiffin loves 7-on-7 football, as we can say that. And you know that like Mike Leach, they're going to have quarterbacks and running backs and wide receivers, and that's going to be a real challenge for Alabama. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I just don't think they're going to be able to block and tackle the way that Kiffin needs in order to beat an Alabama team in his first season.
All right, guys. My thanks go out to Brent Beard from First Coast News and also his show, College Sports Today. Of course, Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama, who's been joining us for years. Please join him and the rest of the staff there. So what we do each and every week is we bring you Ohio State, Florida State, and Miami live streams for 1 full hour. We want to make additions to that. So we've knocked out USC, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, Clemson, Alabama, LSU. We've got more coming, and certainly want you to join in and join these live streams because, man, they are just, I know how to choose. I may not be the best host in the history of college football. I may not be the best analyst, but I know how to choose guests. If I know how to do anything, I choose the best guests around. So thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, guys, it's a pleasure. And as I go here, many thanks to Stephen. Appreciate his good work. Mark, and what you've done has just frankly been amazing. And I will say this for any FSU fans, when you get to that part, and we're in Jacksonville, we're 2.5 hours away, but man, they are excited about Mike Norvell and what he's going to give to them. So that should be great fun. And this was great fun tonight too. Thanks, guys.
We are just a couple of minutes away from Miami Hurricanes live at 7 o'clock Eastern time, and then Florida Gators live at 8 o'clock. Again, Brent, Stephen, thank you so much. I'm indebted to you. Thanks for the analysis, and we will catch up soon.
Look forward to it.
Mark.
Thank you.